Hello and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach Insider. My name is Ben.
And I'm Swiz.
And thank you for joining us for the Fremantle Dockers team analysis. Swiz, always great to have you on board. How are you travelling this evening?
Mate, I'm good. Yeah, no, yourself, Benny?
Yeah, feeling much better now that we've just gotten through that Essendon crap. So we are here. Before we move on, though, let's move on to the socials. SC Insider 100. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. You can also look us up on all the audio platforms, so Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, you name it, and on the YouTube as well. Shout out to everyone up on the YouTube enjoying these releases. Probably these ones a little bit shorter, so we're not kind of splitting them up, and it's just Swiz and me. We're just trying to pump through as much content because we had a negative comment. Boys, release some more content, and we are trying to get there. But Fremantle, definitely a very relevant side. Lots of premiums to quite a few premiums to discuss, ones that could be moving up in the world, sprinkled with a little bit of mid-price and madness, and a couple of rookies that are relevant for now and even possibly as an upgrade target throughout the season. Swiz, what do you think about their potential this year, Fremantle, as far as strategy and options, and then even their fixture moving forward?
Yeah, mate, we talked about the Carlton podcast about there's always that team that jumps up. A lot of people think it's going to be the Blues. A lot of people think it's going to be Fremantle. Been tracking very nicely. Some of their kids are just starting to come on. They've got a really solid ruckman in there. So is it going to be their year? The obvious question will be how much will they be impacted by COVID and what their premier does over there. We've seen in the past that him and Daniel Andrews here in Victoria are more likely to shut their borders quicker if there are outbreaks. So if they can avoid a lot of that, I think Freo are right in the mix, and that means more wins, more percentage of the pie, and more Supercoach scoring, which we naturally like.
Fremantle are a team that I would, if you want a premium, jump on to start. Fremantle are going to make the 8 this year. And I'll tell you why, Swizz. Number one, there's usually a couple of teams that go in and out of the 8 every year. That is a statistical fact that on every year, there's an average of 2 teams that move in and 2 teams that move out. Right. So it's one of those ones where you kind of, when you're doing a ladder predictor or you're doing your tipping, you're kind of looking at, okay, which 2 teams are going in, and Fremantle, I would put money on 100%. Fremantle are making the 8. Swiz, do you agree?
Oh, mate, I agree. And that's where you're talking about that, I guess, that early draw and you get a bit of a run on.
Oh, Fremantle will win 8 of their first 10 rounds. They play Adelaide. All right, St Kilda, which they might lose to St Kilda, right? But I reckon they'll give it. I don't know, but they'll give them a shake there, right? But let's say the winnable games out of the first 10, right? Yeah. Adelaide, West Coast, who are an absolute shamble, right? GWS, who are also falling, Essendon, Carlton, Geelong will be hard, and then they play North, Suns, Collingwood in the first 10 rounds.
Yeah, and then
it's Geelong and the Saints.
Then you get into like the D's and Lions, but then if after that it's Hawthorn, Carlton.
Hawks, Carlton again. So they're going to win. They will win 10 games by the time. And then how many rounds do they have left there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They'll have 8 rounds to go, and they'll be on 10 wins.
Yeah, this is
give or take. It's ridiculous. They are going to smash it.
The only thing, Benny, that's been keeping me from wanting to lock in as many Fremantle players as possible is waiting to see what happens with the borders, because I don't like taking teams that are hubbed. Yeah. But if they aren't hubbed with that fixture early on, they could be a gold mine, and especially the sort of some of those players where you like to take up to the bye and then trade out to Primos. Yeah, their second half of the year is a bit more of a harder fixture, but that first half, I want a lot of that.
So you're saying if they're in a hub, they're capped, right?
Well, I think it is a bit, mate, isn't it? Yeah.
So if it's a hub capped. That's a wheelie. That's a wheelie bad joke.
That's one for the moto enthusiasts out there.
You must be tired of that one. Inflating my own ego. My jokes are bad. They're just getting worse. I am super keen. And just looking at that fixture, man, it makes me want to start some people like Brayshaw. Those first rounds, he could get off the absolute chain. And I haven't had Brayshaw on my side at all this year because I'm like, well, why would you want to pick a breakout? But Serong, Brayshaw, I'm reading this fixture. And I tell you what, they're people you want to start. If you have a soft draw, like Adelaide could go off the chain. West Coast, what's their midfield even going to look like at that point in time? Collingwood, brand new midfield, different dynamics. It's just going to be. I quite rate it, Swiz. now I'm actually thinking, fuck, how can I get as many Fremantle players in my side as I can?
Yeah, this is the problem when we do these pods.
I'm not even kidding.
No, because I literally finish the pod and go, hang on, I've got to change my team here. I've just been talking about this player, and it's recency bias there.
You compare Clayton Oliver's start to his season and how difficult that is for minus Gold Coast, who it's his bunny team. Gold Coast have a really tough start as well. I think Saints have a very soft draw, so I'm big on the Saints. It's they're the kind of considerations though, because when you play top 8 teams, sometimes it's you don't score as much. You get less of the pie, you get locked down and clamped, and your job just becomes a little harder because teams don't allow you those, afford you those leniencies that crap teams do, right? Well, not crap, but as in ones that leak points. And, Brayshaw could just, him and Serong, or even some of these rookies, man, I'm in, I'm invested. Let's see what we've got. Let's have a look. Let's go straight into the premiums, and let's talk about, well, speaking of, bad teams, I wonder what their rucks are like, Swiz, because Sean Darcy, I know it's a little bit contentious because Sean Darcy, a little bit of, was it Achilles tightness, so he got managed for a little bit, but he was flying. He was training super hard. He was light. He was trying to improve his running, and obviously just tried a little too hard, the big boy, a little bit of Achilles tightness that they were managing. Swiz, high score of 193, average 118. Is Sean Darcy now worth the money?
No, well, this is the problem last year, and I don't know if you remember. Every week I was trying to trade in Sean Darcy, and then something else was going wrong with my team, and just couldn't bring him in because I was so big on him last year. And I said at the end of the end of the postseason, I will be definitely starting my team, Sean Darcy in it. But it's amazing how things change, and you look at money and you're like, I can spend that money elsewhere, and that little Achilles niggle and stuff like that, and maybe he has to rest forward, and we've got to give Lord Meek a go or whatever. But his potential to score big, and we talk about that ceiling, is amazing. That run that he went on in the second half of the year was just fantastic. So he gets the ball, wins hitouts to advantage. He's in that perfect age bracket as the ruckman coming through. He's been in the system for ages. So there's a lot of positives about there. Freo on the up.
And if they're winning games too, and they have a good young midfield that are keen to have a crack, he is definitely someone that could go big. Riley O'Brien, probably Marshall, because I don't know Ryder how he's traveling. Nick Nat will probably be the harder one, but then Bruce, Draper, Carlton, who have they bloody got again?
DeConning and fucking
I think DeConning might even be will probably be even number one there this year.
First ruck at the
Geelong, what they got? They got the Geelong Segler. So again, North Melbourne. So Goldie's obviously decent, but he's getting older. Witts, and then it's not really until you hit Grundy and Gawn that it's actually starts to possibly slow him down. And even that's what 9 rounds in. So on the 10th round they're playing that, and he's playing against maybe 1 or 2 solid ruckmen in that time. So it's definitely a consideration.
This is the balance, because you sit there and go, okay, you got 146 versus Essendon last year, 193 against the Blues, 183 against the Hawks, 156 against the Cats, and then the 150 against West Coast. However, you balance that out and go, the 146 was against a brand new Draper, the 193 was against, I don't even know if maybe DeConning very early on his career there. Hawthorn were playing, it could have been Reeves that night, and I think the Suns had Burgess as their ruck. So yes, he had some massive scores, but he actually didn't do it against some of those quality rucks compared to what some of the other players did. So that's just got me looking that little bit deeper, going, do we have enough data against the really good rucks in the league? Your Grundys, your Gawns, your Natanuis. That's the only thing that's probably keeping me going, this guy's 100% lock.
You sound like a Vodafone or Telstra ad or whatever company it is. I don't have to worry about data. We don't have enough data. Don't have to worry about data. And here at Supercoach Insider, we never have to worry about data. Unlimited supply. It's definitely a consideration. And the other thing that kind of plays in my mind is that big boys generally start a bit slower. When you look at the distance in the legs, and ruckmen, they're bigger boys. They take a little bit longer to get the actual match and game fitness to go. Usually ruckmen, they don't just come out and go absolutely blitzing. They kind of start off and they chip away and they get, the 100, or the 90s, 100, low hundreds. And then they really build that momentum, and then they get on a fire. So this is even back like with Sanderlands and all those other guys. Generally, the big boys start a little bit slower, right? Round 1 for how many years? Grundy got like a 90 and everyone's like, oh, baby out of the bathwater. Like, fuck this and trade him. Like, it's It's just stupid. And then it's the mobile rucks that do well in the first round. So everyone's like, oh, let's just trade them in, and absolute anarchy. So that's my other consideration, is that because he is highly priced, do I want to lock myself into that R2, knowing it could be Darcy, knowing it could be Nick Nat, knowing it could be even Riley O'Brien could even impress with a full preseason. He has a high enough ceiling to make a statement, I guess, or a stake in the claim. But that soft draw, man, it's a tough one. Hey, it's getting me nervous and pinching myself, because if Darcy goes big, you're not going to afford him, until the buys maybe, and the ship sailed.
Yeah, and the issue with Fremantle, and they've always been, doesn't matter who coaches them, they're not a high-scoring team. They never have been. So it's not like you're losing points because you're getting those inside 50 contested marks and kicking lots of goals and that. So the points, they win the games, they get a good chunk when they win, but who are the points are going to? Now Fyfe isn't as dominant anymore, and we saw the scaling last year. Darcy, and especially if you get those Perth games where you get the rain come through and it's just throw up, throw up, throw up. Darcy hit out to advantage, 5 points there, 5 points there, and then it gets scaled. And that's the other where he's getting those massive scores. And it could be the same again this year, where he, you get those games and he lays a tackle and there's another hit out, and the score, like, what was that game a couple of years ago where they won like 40-30? No, Carlton might have won that after the sign, 40-36 or stuff like that. You always get these odd Perth games where it's just so low scoring, and they get that Fremantle doctor and the bad weather comes in. So I do like him as a ruck, because Natanui and Fremantle rucks, as you said, Sandilands have scored very well over a number of years, and that's to do with those conditions.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's just going to be the eye test. Now, for some people, you might be like, oh, wow, like a soft draw, I'm in. And that's cool. Like, make up your mind. Don't listen to us 100% of the time. It's one of those things. And sometimes, like with the Collingwood podcast, people are like, man, you gave me more questions than answers.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's just the nature of the business. Sometimes we have more questions that we don't have answers to. And we're kind of just weighing it all up, putting it together, and then just trying to make a good judgment, which sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And at this point, if Darcy gets out there and starts playing preseason and he ticks off the eye test, then I'll tell you what, it's going to be hard for me. I'm going to be trying to fit him in left, right, and center. As long as, with balancing and everything like that. But he is definitely one I've had in my side maybe 30 to 40% of the time. And the other times I like, it's dependent on Bruce and how he goes. So, yeah, it's going to be one of those things. But, yeah, Darcy, don't mind it at all.
Yeah, right now I've got Riley O and Bruce, but I've got enough money to go Darcy in and then Bruce back down to that Hayes or that whatever, that cheap ruckman that we're looking at, the 123.
How do you have so much money, Swiz?
Oh, it's just the way I plan my team, mate. It's, it's all good, mate.
Bloody hell.
It's all good.
Yeah, right. Interesting. So, okay, let's move on. So Brayshaw, we touched on him briefly, had 190, impressed in the time trial with, was it Clark? So Jordan Clark impressed as well in that time trial, 584K. So he is fairly expensive, but again, a discounted price is about 100,000 less than, say, a Touk Miller. And I reckon Brayshaw now, based on the that early draw, I reckon Brayshaw could even, maybe even match it with Tukey for the first 6 weeks. I don't know. That's a ballsy ass statement. That's what I take that back. I don't know.
I like it, mate. I really like. No, stand by your statement. You've put it out there for the people.
But I've been big on. I've been big on Touk though, and the problem is they have a tough start to the year. But the new tackle rules will help Touk. But I think Brayshaw could definitely be pushing that 120 mark. I mean, he averaged 115 the last 6. He was very inconsistent at the start of the year. He had some real big scores of 120 odds, and then followed it up with like a 60 or a 70. Remember, so I think he might get more consistent this year. It wouldn't surprise me if he started coming out averaging 120 plus, or even if he did have a couple of real big games just to inflate that average to start. It's going to be interesting. But Brayshaw now, even for draft leagues, a great VC option, ladies and gentlemen. If you can get him second or third round, fuck, what a bargain. I reckon third round you'd be laughing if you had a Brayshaw.
Yeah, for sure, mate. What was it? Early on here, that 66 and 48. I don't think he's going to be going that low again. And that, everybody has that bad game in that. But it's amazing when tag. Yeah, but it's amazing when those guys sort of hit their 5th, 6th year, you don't see those 40s and 50s in their score again. You might see the odd 70s and that, but they just find ways to find the pill. So already you knock out a couple of those. And he had another, I think there was another low score in there later on. There was a 70 as well. So I think those lower scores start to come up. And then even still, he's ceiling now with Chera leaving, there's those extra points that are going to be through their midfield. Fyfe and Mundy won't be doing as much as the load as they used to. Brayshaw's the number one man in there now. And if Darcy's dominating the ruck, it's +5 Darcy,
it's
straight down to Brayshaw. Yeah, and I'm very tempted to jump on. Like, it's always, can you jump on the breakout when there's other players? But this is what happened last year. People jumped on Parrish. People jumped on Touk. And they were the ones that, were right up there at the come season's end in Supercoach. And these are the risks you have to take. Now, if it doesn't work out, well, at worst, what's he going to average? At the very worst, like, he was 107 last year. He's not going backwards.
No, he won't go backwards.
No, so
even then, 110 to 115. Yeah, 110 to 115, definitely. Off. Yeah.
So what you're looking at is 110 when Touk's going to go in the 120s. So you're 10 points off a game for those first 10 weeks, 11 weeks. You're only losing 100 points out by, and you still save cash. And if you've maximized that cash of 100k to something, if that's the difference between going Riley O'Brien to Darcy, well, you've made those points up or even those points out. But then if Brayshaw was to break out and match Touk or match Steele or Oliver on these tougher draws early on, well, you're way ahead of the pack.
Yeah, no, I agree. And not only that, if you had him last year, expecting, because quite a few jumped on early, right? Secondly, good for standard leagues as well as a point of difference. You don't want every single of the same player. And I think his 190 was actually in a final at some point, Supercoach final or one of those finals. Absolutely dominated people that, when with those that owned him. But if you had him last year and you had the talent and you thought he was talented, then you should be doubling down, right? Not much changes. If you had him last year based on the potential and your belief that he will dominate, he's only going to improve on that. So you should be doubling down. Not, I got burned because I picked him as a breakout, but he wasn't quite a breakout that year. It's kind of like, okay, well, now you should be actually doubling down on that investment. And if you weren't hurt by him, then he's definitely a consideration.
Well, the 190 was against us, so I remember that very well. He just ran around. Right. Richmond don't tag, so we had to sit there all day and just watch Brayshaw just bring his own pill. But you said people are not picking him as the breakout the year before, obviously when he had that 31-point jump, but he still got 6 points on his average last year, and he's got the ability to go that 6-8 points, which that's usually what Zachy Merritt goes, and Zach Merritt's always around that 8th to 10th best player. So Brayshaw could, if he gets that 115, he's still going to be a top 8 midfielder, and you've still paid less than what he's going to go up to. He's going to end up in those 600 price range. So it's not a bad pick, and it just depends if you avoid him compared to a Touk or an Oliver. You just hope those guys don't go, mental early on, and as Oliver's done before and scored a 200 or something like that, you hope they have some of those poor games and you still pick Oliver up for a 600. And that's my only
concern with Clary. They play Gold Coast, I think it is round 2. Yeah, and he's their bunny side. But when you look at outside of Gold Coast, I think maybe 3 or 4 of the other teams that he plays around them, he's notoriously not scoring as well. And the reason it's relevant is because Clayton Oliver went big from his second season. Right, so all of his history scoring against opponents is probably as accurate as you could ever get, because there's not many players that come in from the second year. Clayton's a freak. He came out and dominated with like a 115 average from year 2. And then you look at the stats going, okay, well, his history against opponents is probably as accurate as you could get compared to any other player in the league. And that's what concerned me. But then you look at Gold Coast and it's the bunny side. He just, but shorter preseason, maybe Gold Coast improve. Maybe they have some accountability. It's just one of those things. But if Clayton goes big against Gold Coast and I don't have him, I'll be like crying in the corner knowing that was definitely a likely possibility of happening. So, yeah, Brayshaw, I'm definitely big. 4% owned as well. So definitely a point of difference for someone with a soft draw that could go top 8 potential. He could be the Clayton Oliver of yesteryear.
Yeah, absolutely.
He could be this year's Walsh. Hard running outside and inside, but again, a soft draw. Man, I'm not going to mind it. Man,
well, the soft draw means
could he average more than Titch?
Mate, sorry, mate. The soft draw means that there's always those chances to pick up the goals, and that I was just looking at his tackling numbers, how that compares to some of those other big players, because that's what we're looking at with the rule change. With Steele and Miller, obviously going to be tackling players get more rewarded for some of those free kicks, and it might only be a difference of 3 points a game, but that's still that can be the difference between him being a better pick than Oliver or a McRae or something like that. But so you have your tackle numbers. McRae, and I think it was Clary, both and Bont, all around that 5 last year, and that's what Brayshaw averages. So he's around the same as those premium guys with tackles as it is. So apart from the only thing he's just
Touk and Steele were probably the most. They were the most unrewarded, weren't they?
They were about 3 above that. So Brayshaw's on line with those other guys, and your McRae's, your Bonds, your Olivers. So if you think Brayshaw can probably pick up those extra, probably even if it's an extra possession a quarter, no Chera, easier draw, and pick up an extra goal a game, well, that's sort of your 8-9 points. And that's what we're saying. He's probably got that on him. And if you think 115 paying that price is going to be close enough to average, what's Clary going to go in those first rounds? Even if he goes 120, well, the gap between Brayshaw and Oliver isn't that big, but you're saving 100,000, and that's what it all comes down. What you're going to do with that money. If that means you're upgrading an 110 rookie to Jason Horne-Francis, if that means, as we said before, Riley O to Darcy, that's where the difference comes in, because you can cop losing those 5 points a week to Oliver if he is able to do that.
Yeah, or even then having Bruce as your R3 for a little bit of extra coverage. You know what I mean? Maybe if there was no other option there, then that way you could, I actually don't mind it. And here's the thing, coming into this, I had not had Brayshaw in my team at all. And now I'm like, fuck, how do I get him in? And that's just by looking at the fixture. When you start to look at things and you look at premiums, there's not one rule. But when you start to look, okay, who are they playing? Let's go over the usual that we do. And then you go, wow, that's so... And we've spoken about before, like soft draw to start, get on them. And we said it was it Max Gawn 2 years ago? Right. Basically, I think it was after the first 3 rounds, I'm like, you need to get on Max Gawn now because he's going average 140 for the next 6 rounds. And he went like even higher. It was just one of those things. Soft draw is you generally win more games, you get more slice of the pie, and then you're usually going to have your top premiums just start to possibly run rampant and get a bigger slice of that pie. So it's, it's harder for losing teams to score.
Moving on from the guy who's in 4% to the guy that's at 8%. Now, this guy isn't technically, premium. If people say it's over 450,000, well, then he technically is a premium. But we've got to talk about Serong because it's the same argument about draws.
It is. For me, I probably want the eye test on seeing him. Now, for me, Serong, yes, he's 450K and he probably makes you 100K, but is he going to be top 8 potential? I only see Brayshaw being able to break into that top 8 midfielder from Fremantle this year. That's why I'd be picking him. I understand the price point of difference, right? Patrick Cripps has been there before, similar price point. Could Serong go 115 plus? I can't see it yet. I mean, he averaged 100 for the last 7 rounds. It's possible, I guess. He's shown glimpses, but can he put it all together consistently enough, Swiz? I don't know. I'm not sold.
Yeah. If that last 7 rounds is 110, 115, and he still finishes with that 80 average or 85 average last year, then you've got me interested, because I'm like, okay, there's that scoring period. But a flat 100, I'm like, okay, not only hasn't he shown it, so he's got to show something that he's never done before. And I think a lot of people are jumping on because, oh my God, Chera's gotten all these points. But I think that's more, he's going to get that bump. And we're looking at guys, there's cheaper guys like, your Georgie Hewitts, who, 50, 60,000 cheaper, who are probably going to have that 20-point bump as well. And I think that's which Serong is. He's, averaged 82 last year. He's got 20 points in him. I can see him being that guy who's going to go that flat 100, maybe stretch to 105. But then it puts you in that difficult point where, say, if you're doing it with Hewitt, well, as a defender, you're more likely to be in that top 10 or be challenging for that top 10, where there's so many good midfielders. Serong gets 100, but there's another 30 midfielders who are better than him. So I don't like the price point for the midfield. I don't like somebody who hasn't shown that scoring potential. Definitely going to put 100K on his price. He's going to average well, but I would rather go a person who I'm going to keep for the whole year.
Yep. Can't agree with that anymore, to be honest. So Serong, I understand the upside, but again, I think it's people getting carried away. Everyone's averaging more. he might do a good job and average you low hundreds, which would be fine in a draft league. Picking him up, he's an 82.9 average starting point, so you pick him up at a low 90 position in draft, and you've got some flexibility and some swing and profit margin that you can jump away and dig into. But for him to be a top 8 forward, he needs to go 115 plus. So there's not too often, like Dogs are one where you have multiple, and Brisbane, multiple key players. Melbourne, possibly, I guess Petrarca was not far off that sort of top 10 mark, but it's not that common that you're going to have multiple. I mean, Sydney once had 3, but I need to see it first. And for that, at that point, even if he starts going well, I can't agree more. Next one, let's move on. Let's go out and have a look. Nathan Fyfe, Luke Ryan. I think we'll probably pair these two together.
Yeah.
Fyfe might get a forward status this year, particularly when he had, shoulder surgery and then an infection in the shoulder, so it took a bit longer to kind of get over and that sort of stuff. He had follow-up shoulder surgery, what a tongue twister, and is aiming to join full training in February. Possible for DPP change is what I've got written down here, and touch and go, I think, for round 1. So sort of building. If he does come in slightly underdone, I reckon he'll probably play more time forward just to get himself back in, get some continuity in his body, feel good before he starts pinch hitting midfield a bit more. So he's definitely one to watch if he gets 4 DPP. For me, I'm not starting him because he is underdone. And the next one, Luke Ryan, 540K. With the soft draw again, Luke Ryan could definitely be pushing that sort of top 6 mark if he doesn't get injured. If they utilize him, he averaged 100 or 99.5 the first 6, went huge on the next 6, 113.2, and everyone's like, yes, he's back. Luke Ryan's back. And then he shut the bed with an 87 over the last 7. So I don't know. He burnt me last year, so I won't start him. Even though you're not meant to use your head, you're meant to use your heart or whatever it is, or use your...
The other way around, but yeah, let's go with that.
Don't use your heart, use your head. But he burnt me so bad by missing games last year, and I couldn't get rid of him because he was still doing well enough. So, yeah, what do you reckon about those two, Swiz?
Mate, I'm a big fan of Luke Ryan. The only problem is it's the last 4 years, 20 games, 18, 17, 19. If he at just one point had played 22 games, I might be tempted. The guy's body just lets him down, and it's so frustrating because, he's gone 95, 107, 99. If this guy could play 22 games, he could be the best defender in the comp. And there was one year I think I targeted him as like my number 1 defender, and I went really hard at him. I think I took him in the second round, and that was the year he got 107. Fantastic. But he missed 5 games that year and just frustrated the shit out of me. So I don't mind him looking as an upgrade option at some point, but he's nearly becoming one of those guys you nearly need to start because you think you're going to trade him out. It's the Josh Kelly factor with him. And if he if you get away with it...
Can we use someone else?
Yes. Send those gifts, boys. Send those gifts. 22. If he comes off and plays 22 games, fantastic. You look like a genius. But he's one of those ones you got to think at some point I'm probably gonna have to trade this guy out because he's going to miss 2 or 3 weeks. So I don't hate the pick, but I like better options in that back line just because of his durability. Nathan Fyfe, probably every women's favourite player. Probably dead to most men at the moment since it looked like he was dating Elise Perry, so he can get stuffed.
Was every female's dream until you had a haircut and had some weird patchy ass moustache.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, man, I thought I couldn't grow a moustache, but there you go.
Yeah, well, if Australia's favourite female sport, if everybody's favourite female sportsman likes it, there must be something in it. But it's pretty shit. Yeah, I agree with you with Fyfe. If he got through that whole preseason, but he's one of those ones everybody is just hoping after round 6, DPP, put him in, and we'll pick him up in the forward line, and then you hope there's an injury, and then he moves into the midfield back permanently and does what Fyfe does. So he's one at some point. I think nearly everyone, all the serious Supercoach teams are going to own at some point because he should pick up dual status, all going well, and then we'll be talking about him in later episodes.
Hey, quick question. When we talk about, say, Luke Ryan and at least his scoring potential and his role, which is probably a little bit more certain compared to a Ridley, when you look at the draw that Fremantle have and the role that you think Ryan will play, if he looks fit in the preseason games, who would you rather start?
personally, I'm a more Ryan fan than Ridley.
You see, I was big on Ridley, but now I'm like, hey, maybe I could double down and get butthurt again.
but I would actually say I'm avoiding both. I think there are better, more secure options than right, and probably the thing that opened up now that hauls out people like, oh well, who am I going to go down to? But I still think there are some better options in that defence than Ridley, who are not 100% on their role, as we talked about in the Essendon pod, and Ryan, the injury-prone Luke Ryan.
Yeah, that's true. But again, if you're going to start him, if you're going to have him, you have to start him. I think I did it with Fyfe a couple years ago when Fyfe went big and Chris was all like, I'm not picking Fyfe because he's injury prone. But again, if he's fit with that soft draw, he is definitely someone that can rack up some 120s. And Aaron Hall, wasn't that some interesting news?
The disappointing thing.
The group chat
Grimo was like shit because Grimo has been so big on him, and so was I. But I actually jumped off him last week, and I was like, oh, I hope everyone picks Aaron Hall because it was just something in it going, you know what, I'm completely jumping off this guy, and then he gets injured anyway, and everybody's got to jump off, and it's just like, damn. I was hoping for the burn factor like you, Benny boy.
It seems mean, right? But I was definitely doubling down because. Yeah, I said just because he has one good year doesn't mean he's not made of glass. And I was adamant that he wasn't yes, he has good scoring potential, but I was adamant that he wasn't a durable pick. And he made it through last year. I'm like, wonderful. I am not taking that risk. And I was like, oh, yes, he's a premium. And I was like, okay, cool. He has the potential to score premium numbers when on the field, but I wasn't doubling down on him having a full year. And when I was like, when you're short stocks, you're kind of like, well, I'm going to double down. I'm not taking a loss. I'm doubling down. I'm going to short more stocks. And that's how it was. And when news came out, he's injured, and everyone's like, oh, we have to find a new person to pick and stuff. And I'm just, you don't want to applaud injuries because that's really mean and sadistic and extremely cruel. But I was just like, there we have it. I was like, just messaging all the group chats, like, boom, it is what it is.
Yep.
Anyway, that's a nice little unrelated way to finish up this. We're going to wrap up this podcast here, a nice 30-minute one on premiums, and then we'll do a little segment. Yeah, we'll do a little segment now. We'll do a two-take on this one because we have talked about premiums in an extensive capacity. So we will do the mid-prices and rookies in its own little segment, and we'll see you soon.
Sounds good.
All right, see you guys. Bye. All right, that